In Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, the simulation doesn't start on the runway. It starts in the palm of your hand. The new integrated EFB is a game changer that bridges the gap between the world map and the cockpit. Welcome to this new video, which is part of the Microsoft Flight Simulator A to Z series. This week we arrived at the letter E, which stands for EFB. So let's get started. So we're in a Boeing 787-10 and here we can find the EFB on the left side. In some of the aircraft, for example the Cessna 172, you will find it on the right side. The nice thing that in every aircraft you can press the tab key and then it will open in this view. Here you can see all the applications which are available to you, which include both the first-party apps such as the flight planner, the aircraft, the pilot book and the settings, as well as the community and third-party developer apps such as Bushtalk, Decent Calculator, Phoenix, SimBrief, Navigraph. And on the bottom you can see those, I would say, kind of shortcuts, right, which easily bring you to the different tools. So if I press this one, I will go to the settings, and that's also the first one we're going to discuss. This one includes a lot of interesting things, right? You can change the tablet size. For the recording, I switched to large, but I do recommend you to either use medium or small depending on the configuration which you have. Because as you can see, small is for this video kind of, I would say, too small. But if I press large, you can see that it consumes, I would say, pretty, large size of your screen. And then you might not be able to see all the instruments if you look like this, right? So not super useful. So for now, I will leave it to vertical, or to large, sorry, and to vertical, because horizontal can also be done. So you can also change the tablet orientation. Then we're coming to the brightness. The brightness is, changing default to, I would say, low brightness during the evening hours. That's due to this nice option, the auto brightness option. The auto brightness option reduces the brightness, and if you don't want that, you can switch this option off and then you can change it manually if you prefer to do that. Then we're coming to the default app launched. Which app should it launch by default? And that's where you see a long list, including the first-party apps, but also the community and developer apps. And then it will simply, if you press the tab key, it will open that, I would say, EFB using that application. Now, of course, we've got the version number, the OS version. It runs on OS, so there's an OS version. And then there are those units of measure, which you can change to the measure units you prefer. So you can change the speed, the height, the distance, the weight, the volume and the temperature, and then change them by simply clicking it like this, and then you will change it, I would say, throughout the tablet. Really useful, right? Then the favorites bar. The favorites bar, I already explained it, and that's how I exit the settings, but you can also customize it by pressing add and then adding the, for example, EFB from Phoenix to it, right? This allows me to change it. And then I can also modify it, at least that's what I thought initially, but there's not a lot of movement here which you can do based on my understanding, but maybe we simply need to move it like this. But as you can see, it's not really moving. That would be a nice option, right? There is a nice option where you can do it. You simply delete all of them and then re-add them, right? If I delete settings, and then if I now search in this menu, I can add settings again. So that's the way you need to adjust it. Not the most nicest way, I completely admit. But hey, this is the way you can change your settings inside the EFB, which makes your life, between brackets, easier. Or is it not? Well, I leave it up to you. I leave it up to you if this is, I would say, easier for you to change this. But there is at least an option to change it, right? Now we talked about this one, let's go to the next one, and that's the pilot book. No, we're not going to go in the order which you expect, I know, but we're going to end with the most complex one. So the pilot book simply shows you the flights per week, month, or in a year. It looks at the current year, the current month, and the current week. And if you want to go further back, you need to press the option here. By default, it will show you a summary of everything which you flew in, I would say, in your entire Flight Simulator 2024 life. Number of hours, airport visits, takeoffs, landings. But if you want to look at specific flight, you can also do that. The nice thing about this view is that you can choose between the type of flights, but you can also search for a specific airport, for example, EHAM, right? That allows me to go to a specific flight for Amsterdam to Barcelona, and then I can see everything, right? I can see Was the takeoff during night or day? Was the landing during night or day? How many hours did we fly? What was the arrival time? What was the aircraft which we used? So pretty nice overview. And on the top, there's the total flight hours during day and night and the landings day and night. Nice overview, I would say, pretty useful. And the nice thing is that you don't need to leave the, I would say, aircraft anymore to look at your flight statistics. You can simply do it from here. Then we're coming to the aircraft app, and the aircraft app is pretty interesting because it contains a lot of information. First of all, it comes with the type, manufacturer, creator, and the cruise speed. The manufacturer is of course the real manufacturer. The creator is the one who developed the aircraft for Flight Simulator 2024, and as we can see, in this case, that is Working Title Simulations. They are listed as the creator of this aircraft, so pretty nice. And then we of course have the cruise speed, right? What's the average cruise speed, or what is the cruise speed? This will help you with your flight planning, of course, so keep that in mind. Now, if we want to have more information about the aircraft, we can go to the aircraft information, which shows us the number of seats, the landing surfaces, on which surface can this aircraft land, the average consumption of the fuel, 1479 gauge per hour, the cruise speed, the maximum altitude, also known as the surface altitude, as well as the range of the aircraft. All super important things which you might need to keep in mind. Then we're jumping to the flight performance. No, not the checklist. That will be discussed, but stay with me. This shows you the center of gravity. And it also gives you a visual overview of the aircraft. You can see that it says this is a preview of your aircraft seats. And by using this nice slider, you can either move to first business class or to move to the, let's say, cheaper seats. Using either, let's say, things like this, you can say, hey, I want to, for example, populate the premium economy. And then you can say, hey, with 150, then it will, well, 150 I said. Then it will populate each seat with, in this case, the 150 LBS. You can see it adjusts it automatically. So if I press 150, it divides it and then everything is good. If you don't like this and you want to populate the full aircraft, you can also use the quick fill, because the quick fill distributes it more randomly. At least that's what I figured out when testing this. It's pretty nice. You can see the total number of seats versus the occupation. And if you press this option, you can also change the pilot mass, the co-pilot mass, and the average passenger mass. This differs per aircraft because, for example, for the Cessna, you can type in the LBS per passenger directly in the interface. But hey, that would be almost undoable in this interface using the, Boeing 787. There are a few things which are important. The total mass, right? Keep this in mind. And the reason why is if you press the E from India, you can see the maximums. And here you can see that the zero fuel weight, which is the weight without fuel, I would say we're coming very close to it. Here we can see the estimated fuel and the maximum fuel weight, and also the takeoff weight, the TOW, and also the this is the estimated, right? Which is simply this, the zero fuel weight plus the fuel, and this is the maximum takeoff weight. So really important. Empty, that's this. Then we've got the payload, which is the passengers and the cargo, and then I would say that adds up. Eventually with the fuel, it will is the takeoff weight. Now, the other thing which you can do is, of course, you can add cargo to the aircraft. Adding cargo to the aircraft is, I would say, between brackets, a little bit simple in this case, right? You've got two parts over here and here, and you can either press these numbers and then add, I would say, the rear package, or you can again use a quick fill. And if we would say are pushing it too far, you will see that this one goes into a red angle. So let's do that. In this case, it still goes correct, but keep an eye on this, because I saw in some situations that this will go into the red area, and then you're screwed because this is the center of gravity. If the center of gravity is red, it means that it simply can't take off, or it might be able to take off, but weird things will happen, believe me. Then we've got the fuel. In this case, the quick fill, which can be used, that will equally distribute the fuel in most cases across the tanks which are available. You can also press the E from India here, where you can see the center, left main and right main tanks, in some cases the reserve tanks. And you can also change it to LBS if you prefer that, right? So it's an easy option here, which you can use to change it. Then we've got the empty one. The empty one is a little bit special, and based on my understanding is that sometimes aircraft's center of gravity changes. For example, due to extra equipment, due to some other things which they do, repairs, etc. It could be that the center of gravity changes and then it needs to be readjusted. So the empty center of gravity then could be, say, more to the back or more to the front. I'd say I don't expect it to happen in Flight Simulator, but hey, it could happen. Once you're happy, once you've defined everything, you can of course do two things. You can load the aircraft immediately or save the config and open the ATC. What's the difference? If you say load immediately, the aircraft will be loaded immediately, as the name already says. If you use save config and open ATC panel, you can use the ground services to load the aircraft. That's of course far more realistic and super cool to do, so give it a try yourself. For now, I will press load and fly, and you can see it's being populated. You can see things are changing here, and now the aircraft is good to go. It's completely filled, well, not completely, but it's at least filled, so it will be an expensive flight in this case for the airliner. In addition to that, you've got the environment, and the environment allows you to calculate a few things. So if I press or if I enter an airport here, right, I can simply do Rotterdam or another airport. And then I can add the runway, which is runway 6. I can say dry or wet runway, right? I can change the, I would say, conditions of the runway. That's, I would say, probably the best, say, description of it, I would say. And what I can do with this are some pretty interesting things, because keep in mind that you need to plan your takeoff, right? Because you don't want to end up somewhere in a really weird situation. But to do that, there are a few important things. There's the wind magnitude, right? The strength of the wind, the direction, the temperature, and the QNH, but also the flap index, because the flap index flaps can help you, say, taking off more easily. For some reason, the VR1, the VR, and the V2 are not populated at all. I don't know what it is. Might be me, might be that I missed something. If you got this working, then let me know via the comment box below this video, because I'm super interested in how to get this working. I wasn't able to search or to find something based on some quick searching on the internet. So if you have something, let me know. But then you see a lot of abbreviations here. You see GR, TODR, you see TORA, TODA. What are all those things meaning? So the first one is GR, which is the physical distance the aircraft travels on the ground from the start of the takeoff run until the wheels leave the pavement, right? They really leave the runway. Then we've got that TODR, which is next to it. This one. That's the total distance required to accelerate from a standing start and climb to a specific safety height. That's 35 or 50 feet above the runway, right? That's, let's say, this distance. So important to know. But then we still have the TORA and the TODA. What do they mean? TORA stands for takeoff run available. This means the length of the runway that's physically declared available and suitable for the ground run of an aircraft takeoff. Right? It's, let's say, this is suitable area, right? There's no grass in it. It simply is, in this case, likely tarmac, and then you can take off. And then we've got the TODA, which stands for takeoff distance available. That's the length of the takeoff runway available plus the length of any clearway extra space past the runway with no obstacles. That's most cases after this, right? Some cases you see that the runway is a little bit longer. In some cases you don't, but that's what it means. And that's also, let's say, could be handy in your case. And this can be, I would say, used to, say, at least see, hey, can I take off, yes or no, or are things really going haystack? And it's of course not what you want. Then for the landing, we've got exactly the same, although there are some different abbreviations in that part. So again, runway 6 dry, meter, same thing as always. And then we've got the flaps. And you can see if we would leave it like this, then we likely don't make it, right? Because here you all see the GR, which is a ground roll, but in this case it means the actual distance the aircraft travels on the runway from the moment the wheels touch down until it becomes to a complete stop. So we need 90% more. Well, that's not good. If we look at the LDR, which stands for landing distance required, that's the total distance needed to land safely from a point 50 feet above the runway threshold to a full stop. It includes the air distance before touchdown plus the ground roll. So in this case, you can also see below here, there are some interesting information. Here it says plus 49%, plus 90%, so that's not good. But we also see here LDA, and that stands for landing distance available. That's the physical length of the runway that is declared available and suitable for the ground run of an airplane landing. So we're much over it, right? We're going crazy. So let's see how the flaps will affect that, right? Let's go for flaps index 9. And even in that case, you can see that, let's say, from the ground run, right? Or the ground roll, sorry. We're kind of good, but we're always almost at the end of the runway. Whereas if you can see at the LDR, we're even not, say, able to catch it because we will, again, say, go bypass it. And it's not good, right? Red simply means not good. Green is okay. So this is how you can use these tools. Very useful, I would say, while planning your landings, but also your takeoffs, of course. And now the most important tools, ladies and gentlemen, the flight planner. The flight planner is super handy, but you need to know some things about it because I would say there are also some things which I would say you might be not aware of. As you can see on the left side, you can see a lot of options. The route itself, the performance settings, the flight details, the payload and view, the nav log, the clip charts, and then an airport, right? I can clear this if I don't want to have any maps. So let's start with the second one, performance. Yes, I know that you say, hey, why don't you start at the stop? But I'll explain in a few minutes. This is where you can define the cruise altitude, right? That's the altitude which you plan to fly. So in this case, flight level 411 transfers to this number of feet, right? 41,100 feet. You can also set it to auto. If you set it to auto, then it automatically switches and then it chooses the most efficient altitude based on your weight, the weight of the aircraft and the wind. And you can, I would say, switch on or off this option. I'm not really sure what it means. I couldn't find it also in the manual, to be honest. If you know it, then leave it in the comment box, please, because everybody can learn. Then we've got the step size. And the step size, if the plane cruises, that means that also the plane becomes lighter because it burns fuel. And then it can climb higher to save more fuel. That's what we call a step climb. And this setting tells the planner to look for a higher altitude every 2000 feet of gain. So, could be useful. These are, by the way, the default settings for this Boeing 787. If you fly on the Cessna, this will be, of course, lower. Always check this because in some case you will see that it assigns you a higher altitude above the surface ceiling. And of course, that will not really be good for the aircraft. As with everything comes with cost, and that's what you define in the cost index. So the cost index is the ratio between the cost of time and the cost of fuel. If you set it to 0, you will, I would say, maximize the fuel consumption, at least in a positive way, right? You won't spend too much fuel, so you will also fly a little bit slower, but it will cost you more time, and time is money. So in some cases you want to make the aircraft go faster to save time, but of course you will burn more fuel. Tools like SimBrief will calculate or assign the cost index for you, so you can, I would say, directly take it from there and then put it in here. I heard also that sometimes the airline itself decides what the cost index will be, but that's what I heard. Then we've got the fuel bias. If you fly according to the manual, it consumes a certain rate or a certain amount of fuel per hour or per whatever you want. But that sometimes is not 100% correct. And that's where that fuel bias comes into play, because you can change it. For example, if you burn 5% more fuel, then you might want to take it into account while planning your flight. In that case, you can put a percentage there. Then we've got the descent target FPA. This is a value which we discussed in our previous video. So if you didn't watch it, go watch it, because I explained it in more detail. The flight path angle by default should be -3 degrees, because that's, say, the default descent, also the most, I'd say, efficient one. So you can add it here, and then it is good to go. Then you're good to go, right? So you have, say, nice things. Oh, then I need to set to -3.0. So here we go. But it changes back. Not sure what this is. In the Cessna, this works. But yeah, not sure what it is, but likely it's you need to put a positive number. Not sure in the Cessna it accepts a negative number. Really weird. Maybe it's a bug. Wouldn't be surprised. Then we've got the only use geometry descent, and that's a different value. And this is what it means. If it's set to off, which is the default setting, this means the following, right? The plane descends at idle power, and the path varies based on wind and speed. So there's, I would say, kind of, variancy in the path. If you switch this one to on, like this, then the plane will follow a straight line between the waypoints, so really 3 degrees straight line, regardless of idle thrust, often requiring some engine power to maintain. Engine power means more fuel. Then we see a lot of profiles. This depends on the aircraft. For example, if you do this in a Cessna 172, you won't see these ones. You won't see these ones, you only see standard. But in this case, for an airliner, you can see that you can change it to economic, manual, or that 310 knots / Mach 0.82. So if you want to, I'd say, consume more, you can put it to economic, and also you can set it to 310. You can also see that the economic, it doesn't put any value, so maybe you need to adjust this a bit. Not sure what a reasonable value is. You can see nothing happens, right? So if you want to override it, you can always put it to manual in this case. So manual, economic, and 320. Not sure why those values are not populated. Probably there's a valid reason for that, but know that those profiles are there. And the good thing is that also in SimBrief, you've got those profiles, and you can simply add them here by choosing the manual option, and then you reusing those values which you had from SimBrief. Because you can see economic is, let's say, kind of, pink. Which means that it likely expects a value, but you need to enter it. You can't enter a value here, so weird. And also this one differs per aircraft. I saw some other options below this one, below the only use geometric descent path, and that was the ignore descent altitude restrictions. But for some reason, that's not applicable to this aircraft, but only to, for example, the Cessna 172, where you can say, hey, ignore those, let's say, altitudes which I defined in my flight plan, right? I will simply, let's say, bypass them if I decide to do that. Of course, let's say, watch out and and ask permission. Flight details. Also super interesting, because that's where you define the flight rules. Do you want to fly via the visible flight rules or the instrumental flight rules, right? In an aircraft like this, you will likely fly IFR. This also changes the way you're communicating with ATC, so keep that in mind in a positive way, but that's really important to understand. Then we've got the registration number and flight number. Registration number could be something like N123AB for an aircraft, or hey, BAW123 for a commercial flight. And then we've got those other things, the flight number and the ATC. Now the cool thing here is that by default other is selected, but if you select, for example, American Airlines, it will pre-populate it, right, with a prefix. AA for the flight number, AAL for the ATC sign, and then you can put the numbers in behind. If you set it private, it will be completely blank. If it will be other, you can manually define it. Then we've got the flight data, which is simply the date which you're flying, and the off-block time. This is the time you are, let's say, taking off, right? And that's the time between you travel from the gate to the runway. If you miss your block, then you're not screwed, but then you might need to wait, because ATC simply says, hey, sorry, but your time is already gone. Then we're coming to the more complex part, and that's where you need to define the nav and the com. And that's the nav com equipment which is in the aircraft. So this tells the ATC which navigation equipment and transponder your aircraft has. And you can simply say, okay, I've got the standard, I've got the DME, I've got the ADF, and other things which you can populate, depending, of course, on the aircraft you have. You might need to read the manual for this because, say, for me, so, since I'm not a pilot, I'm, let's say, not a real pilot. I'm really unsure what you need to select here. I don't know which equipment the Boeing 787 has, and that will pre-populate this field. Besides that, we've got the XPR, the transponder, and this is where you can define which type of transponder your aircraft has. So you can set it to squawk only, squawk altitude, aircraft identifier, and then you've got those different modes. We will likely go into a future video about those different modes. And then, of course, we've got the flight type. Is it a scheduled flight? Is it an ad hoc flight? Is it a general flight? Is it a military flight or is it another flight? Based on this, you can define your flight type to inform HC, hey, this is the type of flight. And if you don't think that's enough, you always can add remarks. And those remarks are pretty interesting because the STS allows you to say, hey, this is, I would say, the head of state, right? This gives them some more information than you might want to, which you might want to provide to them. Not some information which you don't want to provide to them because that's where it is for. And this is really the scratch pad where you can send them this additional information. So, with that said, right, what can we do more? Well, we can go to the payload and view, but let me first go to the route, because I do think that most people are interested in how to use this. And likely you've seen multiple videos all about this, so I'm really going, I would say, a little bit faster to this part. If you want to have a detailed video, look at my channel or look at YouTube, because there are multiple other people who are, I would say, who have released videos about this. So you can do two things. You can either type it. If you're lucky, we say Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, and then you can see it automatically adds the default runway. It sets the cruise altitude. It adds no departure. It adds no en route waypoints. You can add waypoints by using the add waypoint option and then simply specifying it. But you can also say, hey, let me zoom out because I want to set a destination airport. In this case, we're going to fly to the other side of the US, because this side has received an update. Also, if you didn't look at my videos, I posted a video about the latest additions or the latest, let's say, enhancements as part of that last city update, which adds a lot of details to these cities. In this case, I click on it, right? I click the airport and say as arrival. This will draw a straight line, so not very useful, right? Because we likely want to say do something. And you can also see that it directly starts to populate the flight plan or the, I would say, facility information with some information, but we will discuss that later on. So in this case, we set Los Angeles as an international airport, Los Angeles International as, I would say, arrival airport, but you can also specify, I would say, an alternate airport. That for some reason you need to type it. So we specify San Diego as other one. And here we've got the flight plan. Now, since we're flying IFR, there are multiple ways. You can say, I want to use the Victor ways. I want to use the jet ways. And if you're flying VFR, you can select VFR. Why is this useful? Because if I select Jet Airways, I can use that find route option. Similar to SimBrief, which also defines your flight path. It also is now partially included in Flight Simulator, where you can see the time from one waypoint to the other one, the speed, the altitude restrictions and predictions, the headings, and also the distance. And this, as you can see, is a lot of information. It also has added the arrival procedures for you. So there's no need to think about some things, right? Because normally you would need to think, hey, which one should I use? Well, it automatically did that. And if you're not happy with it, you can still press that change option to change it. With that said, you now have the full flight plan. So you can press send and you can send it to the HC in avionics, or you can send to the HC. If you send it to the HC will be receiving your flight plan. If you use send to avionics, it will be sent to the computers of the aircraft. So you don't have to type in everything manually. But of course, there are nice hardware, peripherals, which you can also use to program it manually in your aircraft. And I would say do that because it's so more realistic. For now, we will leave it as is. And we will go to, in this case, the payload and view. Because now we add our flight plan, we can start adding the payload and fuel, right? Because we know how much fuel we need, likely, etc. So we can see the zero fuel weight, we can see the estimated takeoff weight, which is the zero fuel weight plus the block fuel, and we can see the total payload. This total payload is being derived from the number of passengers which we added, as well as the cargo which we added. This means that the maximum total weight is this number of lbs, and the ramp rate is this. So we're still good. This is the empty weight of the aircraft. This is the estimated landing weight. And the landing weight is also critical to understand, because if you're landing, then you also need to take into account the weight of the aircraft. Scrolling down, we can see the fuel options, right? 30% total fuel, the taxi fuel is 10, the trip fuel, this is the trip fuel we need, and then we've got those contingency fuel. That depends per, say, region. You can set it to FAA, which follows the FAA rules. You can set it to EASA, which follows the Europe rules, manual or none, or set it to auto, then we'll figure it out itself manually. So this is the contingency fuel. And then the final reserve, that one can be set to none or manual. No matter which aircraft you select, it's always 6. The alternate fuel, for some reason, is not populated. That happens never, but this might also be something which you need to take into account, because at one point you might want to, or you might be diverted to another airport, and then you still need to have that fuel. So this is what you can do. You can of course change this, right? You can set it to total fuel 100. Then you'll see that some extra tankering is required, right? Or including tankering. But you of course also want to use it as optimal as possible, because you don't want to take too much weight with you in the aircraft. Now there are a little bit different options over here, right? You can say configure, that will go to this view. But that's likely not what we want. So let's go back. Because what we want to do in this case is we want to go back to the flight planner and we want to load it. Now here you can see different options compared to the aircraft tab. Here you can say load payload and fuel. Well, loads the payload and fuel. You can say load passengers and cargo. Then it won't load the fuel. And you can say load fuel, which only loads the fuel and not the passengers and the cargo. Right? Still with me? Okay, so those are the options. If you press it, it will do this and it will say load the aircraft. You see the aircraft bumping a bit, and now the aircraft is loaded. If you want to have a navigation log, you also have it available in the EFB, because you can press the nav log option. That shows all the waypoints, including the distance heading and the ETEs to those waypoints, right, from one to the other one. Pretty nice. You can use your stopwatch if you want. And then we're ending at the clip charts. Clip charts, also super nice, because what it will do automatically is add the most important, I would say, charts for you to this clip charts, because it's this flight. You can also save them, because you can press this icon and then they will also appear under the save charts. In this case, I can say, hey, I want to have the airport ground, which shows me the airport ground, and then I can zoom in, because if I'm unfamiliar and being assigned a specific taxi route, I can of course use this black assistance lines, but I can also look it up here and then figure out how I need to travel from my current location to the location where I need to be. Pretty useful chart, I would say, pretty nice, and you can use it because there's also a lot of information on it. For example, the RAM controls, but also the radio frequencies. The good thing is that you can also change it to dark mode, which makes it easier to read in some scenarios. The same thing is for the destination airport, right? You can see the labels. You can see here AGC, which stands for Air Ground Chart, APC, which stands for Airport Parking Chart, AFC, Airport Facility Card. And here are the SID, Standard Instrumental Departure, the Standard Terminal Approach Route, the IAC, the approach, ILS approach, something, I think. Not sure what. But here you can also see multiple charts are there. Pretty cool. But besides that, those charts are also available here. And that's in the facility information. The facility information contains the facility information of the airport. In this case, for Fort Lauderdale, right, the current one where I would say located at, you can see the elevation, the size, the ICAO codes, the MEDAR data, as well as the TAF, which shows you the prediction. And then it shows you, let's say, an easier representation. If you're unfamiliar how to decode this, then it gives you some help. Pretty nice. And you can also go further in time with TAF and you can refresh it. Then we've got the runways, and on runways it also shows you the recommended runway. That's the one which is in most cases active. It shows you the type, it shows you the elevation, it shows you the frequencies. And also, if we go to frequencies, we talked about frequencies. Here are the frequencies which you saw on that map also. And the nice thing is if you press set here, it will automatically set the frequency for your communication channels. Now, if you want to see more charts, you click on this icon because there are more charts, of course, for this airport, but those are likely not applicable to our flight. So although they're visible, you might want to use that clip chart option over here. And if you want to see another chart, you can now also do it here because you can also search for the FAA charts or the Lido charts. So depending on what you prefer, you can change them. And we're going to discuss the different chart types in a future episode. Now we're there, we can of course also, let's say, change some things, right? But in some cases you might want to see how it looks, looks like before you really make that change. For example, if I want to change the arrivals, I can do that. But in this case, we need to look at the aircraft. Here we are. And we also need to discuss these icons, by the way. And that's where I can change, for example, the departures. I say, hey, runway 10 left. Or 28R, that's what we're going to use, and that will filter down those, SIDs, right? So those instant instrument departures, and I can compare it with another one. So I can easily compare it before inserting it in the map. Really nice. It's also available for arrivals and approaches, but I would say watch out that you're selecting the correct ones. With that said, are we there yet? No, because we didn't discuss these icons yet. And I already used one, the recenter on aircraft. Super easy. Recenter on route, focus on the route, right? It zooms out. Then we have got those map settings. And in those map settings, we can define a lot of things. We can change the maps, but we also can change the missions which we can see on the map. We can see the weather, for example, the radar. Those other options, for some reason, you can't say select or deselect them. Then the navigation, which kind of nav aids do you want to see? And the orientation mode, right? North up, heading up, and track up. Again, I recorded a video about these three options, so have a look at my channel because I would say we discussed this in length. And then search for the video which starts with the letter B. The letter B from something. I will let you figure out yourself which one it is. What was earlier in this series? No, just joking. I will add a link in the video description for this one. So I think it was about bearing. Yeah, that was the one. With that, are we there yet? Well, for the default functionality, yes. But as you already saw, there were also some third-party add-ons. And as for third-party add-ons can be used for a lot of things and make your life easier. Let's start with the first one, which is the LNM, and that stands for Little Nav Map. You might use it, you might not use it, but if you're not using it, I would definitely recommend you to have a look at Little Nav Map. Also have a look at my channel, because I recorded multiple videos about this one. The only thing which you need to do, and let me show it quickly in the Little Nav Map solution, is that you need to make sure that the web server is running under the tools, because that's what is required. Then it will open this one. If you planned your flight using Little Nav Map, you can even press the route option here and then you can see your flight. How cool is that? Besides that, there's nothing much you can change, unfortunately. Resolution, update interval, and the quality, that's the only things which you can change. But still, cool one. Now the other one, since we don't know how to calculate those descents, right, the top of descent, there's also a third-party add-on, also a community add-on, which allows you to kind of calculate it if you want. Of course, in most cases will be visible on the display in the aircraft. In some cases, you might want to change it by providing these inputs and then simply click calculate. Let me put in some, let's say, sample data, right? And then 20, 220, 270, 50, and then 180. And then you see, okay, 108 nautical miles. That's the top of descent, right? So pretty nice, easy to use. Besides that, for those who love to fly VFR, there's that Bushtalk client. The Bushtalk client is from the bushtalkradio.com, which is a great tool. You need an account. It's, I would say, it's free, but you can make donations. because these people are creating great software, because this will allow you to get some kind of, I would say, audio playback while you're flying VFR about some, I would say, points of interest around the world. So besides the account, you need to have the POI pack installed from Bushtalk. I will put a link to the download, as well as this add-on, and then you can use this while you're flying, and will simply play out the sound for you and explaining something or where you are flying. How cool is this? The only thing which you need to do is make sure that you logged in via your web browser to the EFB, and then you will see the green bullet here, which is blinking. That means it's good. Then we're looking at some third-party add-ons. Those are created by developers such as Navigraph and SimBrief and Phoenix. So the Phoenix one is only compatible with Phoenix. I'm not going to show it, but let's have a look at the SimBrief dispatcher. This is SimBrief within the EFB from Flight Simulator 2024. And here we've got multiple options, right? You can go to the view flight plan. You can create a new flight plan. You can edit the flight plan. You can look at the weather, multiple other things. Really easily. So simply it's the SimBrief website, but then inside the EFB from Flight Simulator 2024. Only irritating thing is that if you press tab key, then it will, like this, it will close the EFB. But hey, that's what a kind of, well, I'd say, disappointing thing. But hey, still good. So we've discussed enough about this EFB. But one thing I missed, and that's also if you close the EFB, it will be visible here, right? Really cool. And then you also can interact with it. So besides this screen, the popped out window, you can also use this one. But how did, for example, FlyByWire is using the EFB? Let's have a look at it. So we're inside the A32nx from FlyByWire, and here we can see that EFB. So if we press this, we can, I would say, use it right here. Flyby coffee, so you can also buy them a coffee if you want. Say. That's pretty interesting. So by default, there are some weird things happening, but that's due to my settings. So don't be, I would say, afraid. This doesn't happen if you, let's say, don't enable certain settings. This is the overview. You can see it's completely different compared to the EFB from Flight Simulator 2024. You can also open it using the tab key. But in this case, the tab key will open the default Flight Simulator 2024. And that's, I would say, kind of expected. Initially, I was thinking, okay, hey, it's not that nice, but that also explains why, for example, Phoenix developed this application, because in that case, you can manage it via the EFB using the tab key. But for now, we're going to have a look at this screen. We can see a lot of things, right? We can see the flight plan, we can see the weather for the departure airport, destination, we can see charts which are pinned. And I can also change the order, right? I can simply press this and then it will be changed if I want to do that. But let's first go to the settings. In this case, what you will see, I will go really quickly to the settings because there's simply too much to go to, let's say, in this video. There are a lot of default settings. For example, the thrust reduction height, right? The acceleration height, where it wants to, say, accelerate throttling, where it wants to, let's say, thrust, where it wants to reduce, right? It wants to go to climb mode. Engine out acceleration height, barometer settings, which you can change here. Also the RMP VHF spacing, that's for the modern radios in Europe. That's also now being applicable or available, I should say. And the pack signs, right? No portable device, no smoking. Well, it's not allowed to smoke in aircraft for a very long time. So no portable device also can be changed. And besides that, there are some other things like, for example, the automatic callouts, which you can configure here. So a lot of options, and this is only the first menu. Because if you go to the second menu, you can also change other things. Here you can see some duplicates, right? The barometer unit setting is there. But also here you've got the option to automatically import the flight plan inside this EFB. Because this is a separate EFB compared to the EFB from Flight Simulator 2024. Super important to understand. And for those who want to use SimBrief, separate utility, you can also connect it by using these tools. Other options which are there are some wheel chock safety cones and the enable flight data recorder, as well as the throttle detents. For those who are having throttles, this is the most important setting because you need to calibrate it, because else it might not work as expected. For those who are not using, I would say, a joystick. or not the throttle, sorry. For example, Xbox controller, you don't need to use that massively. Use calculate ILS signals. These options can be enabled, but you can first give it a try without, because they're, from my understanding and from my, I would say, experience, they're not that important. Besides that, you've got the realism settings. So the realism for the aircraft can be defined in this part, where you can set the ADIRS alignment, right? The navigation alignment, the DMC self-test and the boarding time, set it to real, fast, or instant. Instant, then it's really with a finger snip. Fast, it goes a little bit faster than instant, or slower than instant. And real, it really takes the time it normally takes. Besides that, you see a lot of options over here where they say unrealistic. Don't touch those ones, because that will make it, well, it make it easier for you, but it doesn't make it that realistic anymore. So leave them as is. Besides that, you've got the show pilot avatars, and you separate tiller from rudder inputs. That's, would say, to avoid that you're managing two systems where you don't want to do that. Then third-party add-ons, this is where you see the Navigraph addition, but also the GSX integration. So if you have both, then you can benefit from this in the fly-by-wire settings. The ATSU, says AOC, that has to do with the data sources, because by default it's set to FAA, but you can also set it to the third-party developers, Pilot Edge, Eval, VetSim, the networks, I should say the 8C networks. Meta source, Microsoft Flight Simulator or the other ones. TAF source, similar, and error reporting and TLEX if you want to switch it on, as well as the ACARS provider. You can enable it if you want, but there's no hard requirement to make any changes here. Then for audio, you can change the audio, change the volume of the audio. It would also change the passenger ambience, the sounds and the announcements. And if we then go to the flypad, that all has to do with the flypad settings. So you can change the brightness, you can change the language, you can change the theme, whatever you want. So those are the things which you can find here. Going back to the flight plan, right? This is the first page. But let's go to the next one, because it's a dispatch. And this is why that SimBrief integration is required, right? That SimBrief authentication, because it's able to download the SimBrief information, and then you can use these scroll bars and read to the dispatch. You can zoom in out. You can also get an overview, but that one shows the overview where it looks at certain parts, right? It looks at the maximum fuel capacity, the MSFW, zero fuel weight, maximum passengers. This is more the aircraft information, where this is more the dispatch information. Besides that, you can control the ground services. Ground services can be found here. Let me go to that. So for example, you can say, hey, I want to connect a jet bridge. I want to have the passenger stairs. I want to have an air starter unit. I want to open, get a fuel truck. But besides that, you also have the fuel, which you can manage from here. You can manage the fuel, you can change it, you can refuel it, you can set it to real, fast, or instant. That's the refuel time. And you can also pull those details from SimBrief. Really easy, because then you don't need to think about it. It'll automatically distribute it correctly. Then, of course, we've got the payload, which is the number of passengers, the cargo, the zero fuel weight. And again, you can change it. Right, you can see that you can change it from GW to ZFW. So depending on what you prefer, you can, I would say, change it. You can see there's some changes, but you can also import them, right? How easy is that? And then besides that, you also have the GSX payload sync, which will use that GSX integration to, say, kind of load the aircraft. And then the most nice thing, well, not most nice thing, but a nice thing, is the pushback, because you can also manage a pushback truck from within the EFB, right? You can set a pushback system, you can switch it on or off, and then you can say, kind of, let's say, use the system here. But if you've got GSX, then you might not want to use it, but it really depends on what you prefer. Where the default add-in from Flight Simulator, or the default EFB from Flight Simulator, doesn't have calculation capabilities, or at least they don't work. The nice thing about this is that it works. So you can specify your ICAO code manually, or you can say fill data from OFP or the METAR data. So if you press the option, you can see it automatically populates everything. Then I can press calculate over here, and it will calculate my V1, VR, and V2. If I don't want to clean it, I can clear it. But if I want to change some things, I can also do that. Super nice. Now besides that, it has the top of descent that's being automatically calculated. By default, it will try to capture the information from the aircraft, but you can also manually input it by pressing the manual input. You can sync the data right while you're flying, and then it will say, hey, this is the number of this is the distance before you need to start your say descent, right? That's say pretty cool functionality also. Then of course we've got the landing, similar to the say takeoff. We can populate it depending on how good it goes. In this case, it doesn't go that good. But it should normally work exactly the same. And then you can see, okay, hey, if I, for example, press the ICAO code from this airport, where are we? ICAO code, let me, KFLL. Oh, here you can see the tab, right? Runway 28R. And then I need to define everything, of course, here. Overweight, no. Flaps full, approach speed 180. Let's see, is that everything we need? Yeah, we need the temperature. I'm simply typing in some numbers, right? 29.91. Wind 10. Did we specify enough? Runway slope 0. That's always a tricky thing, right? Let me get it from meter in that case. Fill from. And normally it should show here calculate. For some reason I'm probably missing something, but it should show it. And then based on that, it will, I would say, make it able for you to calculate if you've got enough distance on the runway to, say, perform your landing. Besides that, we've got the charts. And the charts are between brackets nice and not so nice. The Navigraph one, if you've got a subscription, it's super nice because then you can pull the maps from Navigraph for a specific airport, right? KFLL. And then you can pull it like this and it will load the map. But you can also pull it from local files. Those are both images and PDFs. You need to store them on your local drive and then you can pull them inside the aircraft. Besides that, we've got the ATC. This is for those who are using iVal or RedSim. Then you can use that. Then you can change those settings here. But since I didn't have added them, I can't change them here. And then we've got, I think the most coolest functionality is you can create failures in your aircraft. Failures while you're flying or before you're flying, or while you're flying or while you're landing. And then, for example, change some issues with the flight controls and then activate it. This will make your life really challenging, but also super cool. So have a look at it and let me know what you think about it. And then, of course, another important thing are the checklist. Here you can see all the checklists. There are not, I would say they're missing those eye icons. So you need to figure out where that component is yourself. But again, checklist super complete, super realistic. And you can use it by, I would say, marking those items off if you want, of course. And then we've got the presets. Presets, you might think about different things, but the preset is for the interior light as well as for the aircraft state. The interior light simply allows you to change the interior light of the aircraft, and the aircraft state allows you to bring the aircraft, for example, in the ready to taxi or ready for takeoff state. So super nice options inside the EFB, and there's also this one on top, right, which you can do. And that's also super important because this one allows you to also say on-screen keyboard, the sim rate, you can change it here for those who want to, say, speed up the sim rate. You've got the finish boarding, you've got the align aiders, which you can do directly. You can pause on top of a descent, right? If you want to stop there, if you want to take some coffee and don't want the aircraft to, I would say, fly too far and then you missed your approach or missed your descent point. You can change the direction or the brightness. You can go to dark mode. Yeah, you can switch the switch it on or off. All those things are available now in this nice EFB from FlyByWire. And with this, let's put them next to each other, right? On the left side, you see the default EFB. On the right side, you see the FlyByWire EFB. We looked at both of them, and that's also where we end this video. So short summary, the default EFB can be used for all the aircrafts, right? It has some third-party applications which you can import, as well as community add-ons. This one, the FlyByWire, and likely also most of the other ones are only working inside the aircraft. except the Phoenix EFB, which also has the ability to kind of pop it out. I do think that more vendors will do that, but let's see how that works out. I hope you liked this video where we went to a full review of the EFB, to all the options, to all my things which I observed while using it. Again, if you have some tips for me, then also let me know, because not only me, but also my other viewers of my channel are, I would say, can benefit from your tips or tricks. Next week, it's time for another Microsoft Flight Simulator A to Z series. And keep an eye on the channel, because I will post, well, kind of a survey where you can select the next topic. The letter will be the F from Foxtrot. The topic, let's see which one wins. Until next time.